Today, we're going to talk about two of the most important moments in human history. These are the game-changing innovations that literally took our ancestors from just trying to survive the world to actually starting to shape it. These are the revolutions that everything else is built on.
And it all really comes down to this one question. Think about it. How did we get from these small, wandering bands of people to, well, to all of this? The answer, incredibly, starts with a controlled flame and a few carefully planted seeds. So, let's get into it.
All right, so our story kicks off with the first great tool that humans truly mastered, something that gave us real power over the darkness and the cold for the very first time: fire.
Now, our much earlier ancestors probably used fires they found, from lightning strikes. But the evidence suggests that by about 125,000 years ago, we had finally cracked the code. We didn't just control fire anymore, we could start it ourselves. And that, right there, was a monumental leap forward.
So what did this actually mean for daily life? Well, pretty much everything. The practical upsides were huge. Fire gave us warmth, which meant we could survive in colder places. It kept predators away at night. Cooking our food made it safer and way easier to digest, which unlocked all these crucial nutrients for our growing brains. It even helped us make better tools. But the impact went so much deeper than just survival. It became a hub, a place to bond, a reason to talk.
And that's the real kicker. Its greatest power wasn't just practical, it was social. You see, the campfire basically became the first human living room. It was the center of everything, a place to gather, to share stories, to build those vital social connections you need to survive. It was probably right there, around the flickering flames, that our most powerful tool of all, language, really started to take off. And these brand new, fire-forged communities were about to be tested. They were about to face one of the absolute harshest environments in the history of the Earth, the Ice Age.
And just to put this into perspective for you, our planet has gone through at least 5 of these major deep freezes. We're zeroing in on the most recent one, which, as you can see, hit its absolute peak about 18,000 years ago. This was the world our ancestors had to figure out how to live in. The sheer scale of this world is it's hard to even imagine. At the poles, the ice sheets were sometimes 2 miles thick. This wasn't just a really long winter. This was a hostile, frozen planet where every single resource was incredibly hard to come by. So how did humans face this immense, frozen world? Not as some huge army, but in tiny, nomadic groups. These hunter-gatherer bands were often no larger than 40 people. They had to stay small and mobile, or they'd completely exhaust all the food and resources in one spot. Surviving in those kinds of conditions demanded a very specific way of living together. Egalitarianism wasn't some lofty philosophical ideal, it was a practical necessity. When your group is that small and the world is that dangerous, everybody has to pull their weight. Cooperation isn't just nice, it's the only thing that gets you to tomorrow. And yet, even in the middle of this constant, brutal struggle for survival, something else, something uniquely human, was starting to bubble up. People weren't just thinking about their next meal. They felt this deep, profound need to create, to express themselves, to leave a mark on the world.
And we're not talking about simple stick figures here. This art was incredibly sophisticated. Take the famous bison paintings in Altamira Cave in Spain. The artists were so clever, they actually used the natural bumps and curves of the cave walls to give their paintings this stunning three-dimensional look.
This contrast just perfectly captures what it was like to be alive back then. On the one hand, you have this brutal reality of a hostile climate and a constant search for food. And on the other, you have these breathtaking expressions of creativity and culture. It just goes to show you that even then, being human has always been about more than just surviving.
So as the great ice sheets finally started to retreat, humanity was standing on the edge of the single greatest transformation in its entire history. A change so profound, it would completely reshape our societies, our planet, and our future.
It was around 12,000 years ago that some groups of people, for reasons we're still debating, made a really radical shift. They started to move away from just taking whatever nature happened to provide.
This was it, the Neolithic Revolution. This was the moment we went from being hunter-gatherers to becoming farmers. We started actively growing crops and taming animals, and that fundamentally changed our entire relationship with the world. We weren't just living in nature anymore, we were starting to manage it.
And that one change set off a massive domino effect, right? Once you've got agriculture and domesticated animals, you don't have to wander around anymore. You can build permanent settlements. And when you can grow more food than you need, a surplus, well then not everyone has to be a farmer. And that right there allows for specialized jobs, and that is the absolute foundation of civilization.
What's so fascinating is that this wasn't just a one-off thing. The Neolithic Revolution popped up independently all across the globe. In the Near East, people figured out wheat and barley. Over in Mesoamerica, it was squash and maize. And in China, they cultivated millet and rice. Different people, different plants, but the same revolutionary idea sparking everywhere.
So why does any of this ancient history matter to us today? Well, because the world we live in right now, the very structure of our lives, was built on the foundation that was laid all those thousands of years ago.
When you get right down to it, this one revolution made everything we know today possible. It meant we could support much larger populations, which led to the first cities. It created new social structures that weren't so egalitarian anymore. It gave rise to specialized jobs: potters, priests, soldiers, rulers. Simply put, it paved the way for civilization itself.
But it's a complicated legacy, isn't it? The agricultural revolution gave us civilization, sure, but it also introduced things like social inequality, warfare on a larger scale, and brand new diseases. It solved a whole bunch of old problems, but it created a whole bunch of new ones. Which kind of leads to a final question for us to think about: what's our next great revolution going to be, and what new world, with its own new challenges, will it create?